Hello and welcome to BYJU'S IAS. Let's begin today's session of comprehensive news analysis with the first article that talks about how the goods and services tax, that is a GST, is still an unfinished agenda. The authors here are trying to point out the lacunas in the existing system of the GST in India and are comparing it with other countries around the world such as Australia, South Africa, Malaysia that have also implemented GST. The authors here are trying to point out the problems that the GST has, and their underlying theme of the article is that it has not met the expectations that we thought that it would. The authors say that the GST was expected to improve the tax to GDP ratio in India, to end the cascading effect of taxes, to enhance the efficiency of tax collection, and much more. Because the GST system was different from the earlier existing system, there were certain states, mainly the manufacturing states, that would have lost out on their tax collection. Thus, the government under the GST law had promised them that for the first 5 years, if you have any shortfall of tax collection due to the GST, the center government will compensate you. But as we have seen, the center government has not compensated the states who have faced the shortfall due to the GST implementation, since the center government has called it an act of God. As per the center government, because the GST collection have dropped down due to the pandemic, the center government does not have enough money to compensate the states. That was a constitutional guarantee. And that underlines why the GST has not been favorable to the states, because they have not been getting their due. As per the authors, the entire GST regime is based on two important components. First, the GST Council. As you know, the GST Council is the highest decision making body about the GST, and it is headed by the Union Finance Minister. From the side of the center government, we also have the Minister of State of Finance Ministry, and from the state side, every state is represented by their own finance ministers. This is the GST Council that decides everything about the GST. But the problem is, if you look at the working of the GST Council, it is highly in favor of the center government. How? The voting pattern is decided as such that the Union Minister of State and the Union Finance Minister together have one-third votes in the GST Council, and the remaining two-third votes are divided between the states. But the problem is, for any decision to be accepted in the GST Council, it needs to be supported by 75% votes. Meaning that if for any decision, if the center government says no, then even if all the states say yes, they will not be able to pass that decision in the GST Council. Thus, as per the authors, the organization and the working of the GST Council goes against the concept of cooperative federalism. And that is why it is a big problem and the states have not been able to get their due. Secondly, the GST, as we know, is a destination based consumption tax. In simple terms, before the GST, those state governments used to get more taxes where products were manufactured in large numbers. However, now the GST goes to that state where consumption is happening. So, all the states that invested in their manufacturing capacity, that invited the companies to set up the manufacturing plants, those states have lost out on a lot of taxes such as excise. To help the states that are still heavy on manufacturing, the government did introduce the concept of IGST, but that has not been able to offset the loss that the manufacturing states have been facing. The objectives of the GST have still not been met. As we discussed, we expected that with the introduction of the GST, the tax to GDP ratio would improve, tax efficiency would improve, and the government would have more money, since the prices of the commodities in the market will come down and the demand will increase. But that has not happened. In at least 18 major states, the tax to GDP ratio has just come down. While the share of the center government in the total GST has increased by 6%, for the states it has only increased by 4.5%, and that too only in those states where more consumption is happening. You have to understand that the GST bill was only passed when half of the states said yes. It was a constitutional amendment that changed the federal structure of India. So in reality, the states sacrificed a lot of their tax revenue for the GST to be introduced. And now what we are seeing is that the states are the ones that are losing out on their revenue. Not just this, over the years, there have been a lot of massive evasion of taxes. A lot of fake invoices are also being made in the market so that the people don't have to pay the GST. The authors say that we can learn from the example of South Africa, where the government introduced a GST hoping that it would increase their revenue. But since there were a large number of exemptions from the GST, that is, many things were not covered under GST regime, the entire regime failed. In India also, oil and alcohol are still kept out of GST, and that is an indication that the government must make efforts to introduce them also under the GST regime. The other reason why GST may not have had the kind of positive impact that we have hoped is because of the timing. The GST was introduced right after the country went through demonetization. That is, there was already a financial crunch and the demand in the market was already at an all time low. Thus, there is no surprise that GST has not been able to fulfill its expectations. With the introduction of the GST, the state governments let go of over half of their tax revenue, while center only surrendered about 28.8%, hoping that in the long run it would be beneficial for them and the country. But as you can see, the states have not even been compensated for their loss of revenue, which was supposed to be a constitutional guarantee. Thus, it seems to be a bad decision for the states at least. The issue of IGST also has not been resolved. As I said, IGST was introduced so that we can still compensate the states which are heavy on manufacturing. But that requires a transparent functioning of the tax credit system and a very robust IT infrastructure which has not been built around the GST. Malaysia also suffered from these issues and it ended up abandoning the GST finally, and we should not go through that route. Even in Australia, the GDP after implementation of the GST revenue has in fact come down rather than going up. See, the expectation with the GST was that GST will replace multiple taxes. With one single tax instead of multiple taxes, the prices of commodities will come down in the market. When things become cheaper, government thought that this will lead to more consumption. More consumption means more taxes. So in the long run, the economy will improve. But as you can see, even in Australia, where GST was introduced in 2003, even till now, their GDP has not really seen any sign of improvement. One of the reasons for that is in India, when the taxes were cut down on certain products, the companies increased the prices, thus increasing their own revenue. As a result of which, neither the consumers nor the state governments in India have benefited from the introduction of the GST. This is what the authors point out and say that there is an urgent need for reforms in the GST. Now, although the authors have not pointed out towards any positive aspect of GST, we will do that so that we can cover this topic holistically. There are some positive points about the GST also that have been seen in the past few years. For example, the number of registered taxpayers under the GST has been increasing. Initially, it was 65 lakh. As per the latest data of the government, now there are about 1.29 crore active GST registrations, which is a very good sign. Not just this, almost every second or third month you keep on reading that the GST collections this month is at an all-time high, which is an indication that the GST collections are improving. So maybe we are judging the GST in a very short time period. The number of e-way bills also are improving, meaning that the number of fake tax invoices are coming down, which will bring more people under the net of the GST, thus making the system even more efficient. There is a criticism that there are so many slabs of the GST and we should have one single slab, but the reality is that only 3% of the products are in the 28% GST rate, while majority of them are still covered under 5% and 12% rates. So yes, there are multiple slabs 0, 5, 18, 28, but the 28% slab is reserved for very, very few products. Next, about the center state relations. Yes, in the GST Council, the union government has more powers as compared to the state governments. But if you actually see, most decisions taken in the GST Council are taken unanimously. It is not that the center government is imposing its decisions on the state. And lastly, after the introduction of the GST, the interaction with the tax officials has come down considerably. Less human interaction means less chances of corruption and lesser chances of process being extremely long. So these are the positive points about the GST here. Yes, there is a lot of scope for improvement, but judging such a major reform in just about 4.5 years of its existence is not very fair on the GST law itself. The next article that we have is from two educationists, and it focuses on the mental well being of teachers that has not been a priority in the country. The authors here say that due to the COVID pandemic lockdown, the education system in India has suffered great losses. While most of our focus has been on bridging the learning gap of the students, somewhere down the line we have ignored the impact that it has had on the teachers. And now it is time to ensure that the teachers who are leading the classroom are well taken care of. The authors say that India has about 9 million teachers, including those working in the government schools, low income private schools, high income schools, etc. And there is a large disparity amongst them. While those working in the government schools have better qualifications, better salary, better system protection, those working in low fee private schools are paid extremely low salary. If you look at teachers who are teaching in private schools in tier 2, tier 3 cities, they get a very, very meager salary. In many cases, their salary would not even be 10,000 rupees. As compared to those who are working in government schools, they get a handsome salary of 60, 70, even 80, 90,000 in many cases. So there is a large disparity amongst them. But more importantly, during the COVID 19 pandemic, teachers, especially in urban private schools, have been facing a lot of pressure. Ever since the COVID 19 pandemic began, you would have seen many news articles about the parents not being willing to pay fees to the schools. Now, if the parents won't pay a fee to the school, how would the school pay the salary to the teachers? There were a lot of talks about teachers getting a salary without any work. But in reality, this pandemic time was also extremely hard on the teachers as well. Many of them were bullied by the parents. For instance, there were online classes that were being held in almost every school. Now, in most of the cases, when the teacher was teaching online, the parents of the students also used to sit with them in the same room, keeping an eye on the teacher, making them nervous. Even the smallest of mistake by the teacher, even pronunciation mistakes were pointed out by the parents, and they were bullying the teachers in front of everyone, which led to their own mental harassment. I'm sure all of you would have seen videos on YouTube of Zoom classes where the students are making fun of teachers. Yes, you can laugh for that moment, but if you think from the teacher's point of view, it led to large scale mental harassment for them for something that was not even their fault. A lot of teachers went outside their comfort zone, learned new things just so that they can continue the education of the students, but all they had from the society was criticism and mental harassment. And this was not even enough. Especially the teachers in the government schools were forced to be on COVID duty without any proper protocols being followed. And this happened in most of the states. Not just this, the teachers were asked to go and distribute immunity booster tablets. Many of them are regularly asked to be on election duty. Even not just this, many teachers were even put on duty of the mortuary to go and keep an eye on the number of people who are dying due to COVID. And this happened across the country. All this was happening when teachers were still being told that we are giving you salary without any work. But was it a fault of teachers or was it a fault of the entire system? The authors here say that teachers across the country took a lot of burden on themselves and held the general public. For example, in Maharashtra at Akol, teachers started a COVID care facility that treated almost 650 patients and returned them home. We must understand that the teachers are the ones who are shaping the minds of young people in India, and their well being should be a topmost priority. If the teachers are not feeling well, it is impossible for them to impart good education to the students. The authors suggest that the government should create spaces where the teachers can talk about their stresses and their well being in a supportive environment. The schools also must invest in the mental health of the teachers and address policies which are bullying them. Just imagine, we talk a lot about the celebrities facing depression when they take some extreme steps, but very seldom do we associate this problem of depression and mental harassment with the teachers who are being forced to suffer in this environment. Now, since I am representing the teacher fraternity in front of you, let me put in front of you some more points for you to understand what teachers have been going through during the pandemic. In UP, over 1600 teachers lost their lives because many of them were forced to go on panchayat election duty during COVID-19 pandemic. The Telangana Teachers Association said that 230 teachers have lost their life, and same is the case with many other states because the government school teachers were forced to go on duty even when the first and the second waves were at their peak. There are multiple teacher unions in India that have been demanding that teachers should be treated as frontline workers so that they are covered under government schemes. However, only Kerala has declared the teachers as frontline workers, while some other states are still in the discussion stage for the same. One of the reasons why teachers are facing these problems is because there is no national union. There are unions of teachers in the states. Even within the states, you see there are multiple unions at times. Because they are so divided, they don't really have a collective bargaining power. For example, if the government tells the teachers that you have to go on panchayat election duty, they don't have the power to say no, we can't do that because it is dangerous out there, because they know that they will be suspended from their job. But if they know that they have the support of all the teachers across the country or across the state, they can take a collective stand. That is the power that a union brings to them. Even when there are unions, most of them have very little participation from women teachers, and thus their issues are very seldom highlighted. The government has not even consulted the teachers' union about when to reopen the schools and how to reopen the schools. When the government had to decide about reopening the schools, they asked the students, they asked the parents, but very little consultation was done from the side of the teachers. There was a report a few years back titled Involvement of Teachers in Non Teaching Activities and Its Effect on Education. It revealed that in 2015-16, on an average in a government school, the teachers only spent 42 days on teaching. Now, you might blame the government school teachers for not being present in the classroom and not being teaching, but the reality is that they are forced to do a lot of other works. The right to education says that the teacher must spend at least 220 days in a year teaching. But because of all the non teaching assignments that the teachers are put into, it is very difficult for them to fulfill these years. Teachers in government schools spend 81% of their time in non teaching activities such as election duty, working as block level officers, conducting surveys, etc. In fact, the new education policy also says that the government must not engage teachers in non teaching work. The next write up talks about the need to bring in the farm reforms. The write up here says that the government's step to take back the three farm laws is a good step. However, rather than forgetting about it, the government should now use this time to bring in a consensus so that all the political parties and all the stakeholders are on the same page, and then the reforms should be introduced. There is no argument against the fact that the farm sector in India needs a lot of reforms. However, those can only be possible if there is sufficient political support and all the stakeholders are consulted with it. The farmers, as you have seen in the news stories now, are going back to their places. However, their key demand to have a law on the MSP still remains. The government has decided to form a committee to look into this question, and the committee would have representations from the farmer side as well. The article here says that since the MSP mainly only covers rice and wheat, it forces the farmers in Punjab and Haryana to stick to those crops only. So maybe if we expand the coverage of MSP and if we support it by a proper law, it would encourage the farmers to take up other crops as well, which would require lesser water, which will be beneficial for everyone. However, before introducing any reforms now, the government's first step should be to build a proper consensus, because everyone across political party lines wants to help the farmers, everyone wants to increase the income of farmers. But if it is done in a way that these farm laws were introduced, it will never see the light of the day. Now, we all keep talking about the reforms that are required in our agriculture sector. So, let's discuss what exactly are the problems that our agriculture sector is facing. Although there are a lot of them, but I have listed for you here some of them so that you can understand the key points. First big problem is that of the land size. Many studies have proven that smaller the land size that you have, the lesser would be your productivity. The larger the land size, more is the productivity. That is why many countries such as China started the concept of cooperative farming, meaning that the farmers having small land holdings were asked to club their land together and do farming together, which increased their productivity. Let me give you an example of a problem. Let's assume there is a farmer that has 100 acres of land. In the rural areas, the rate of reproduction is much higher. Let's assume that this farmer had about 5 sons. So, in the next generation, he divided his 100 acres land into 5 pieces. So, every son now has only 20 acres of land. Let's assume in the next generation again, every son has 5 children. So, their 20-acre land becomes 4-acre land each. So within 2 generations, the land size of 100 acres became just 4 acres. And in the next generation, it will even go down further. So the size of land holding with every individual farmer keeps getting smaller and smaller, which is leading to a lot of loss of production. The average farm holding size in India right now has come down to just 1.08 hectares. Now, the interesting point to note here is in case of China, the land holding size is even smaller. That is about zero point 0.6 hectare. But still, their productivity is much better as compared to India. For example, they have been using the concept of cooperative farming even when the farmers don't want to. They have to club their land together. Not just this, the public investment in agriculture and agricultural technology in China has been much better as compared to India, which is missing in case of India. So there are a lot of agriculture lessons that we can have from China as well. Not just this, our agriculture's field has not had access to modern technology in the past few decades. In most of the farm holdings, we are still using manual labor that has remained the same over the decades. Also, while 45% of India's workforce is involved in agriculture, the problem is not all of them are land owners. Many of them are just farm laborers. For example, many of the farm laborers who are working in Punjab and Haryana are not really farmers. They are laborers that have come from the states of Bihar, Jharkhand, UP to work with farmers in Punjab and Haryana. So while the farmers may still be better off, the farm laborers earn very, very little for their hard work on the field. The investment in the field of agriculture also is falling down. As we just saw in case of China, it is much, much better. And then the MSP. While the government has been increasing the MSP consistently, but the rate of increase of MSP does not match the rate of increase of the cost of production. And that is why, although the government did give this idea of doubling the farmers' income in a few years, but that does not really look to be within the reach of the government looking at the policies that we are following. The next news piece that we will discuss is that the UN General Assembly has conferred the observer status on the International Solar Alliance. As per the article, this would allow much better cooperation between the International Solar Alliance and the United Nations and help the group in achieving its true potential. As you would know, the International Solar Alliance was a joint effort between India and France, especially to bring all the solar rich countries under one single roof. The two nations came together at the 21st Conference of Parties in Paris in 2015 and led to the formation of ISA. Now, recently, if you remember, the fourth General Assembly meeting of the ISA was held. So let's revise what exactly is ISA and what exactly is India doing to harness the true potential of solar energy. The Prime Minister recently listed out 10 action points in the fourth conference of International Solar Alliance for the entire world. The Prime Minister said that the ISA will try to ensure cheap and improved solar power, will try to increase the percentage of solar energy in the countries that have the potential, will try and encourage innovation in the field of solar energy, so on and so forth. This 10-point action plan can be very handy for you in the examination. Now, the ISA, as we discussed, was launched in 2015 and has been joined by over 100 countries. In fact, just a few months back, the United States of America also joined the International Solar Alliance. It is a coalition of countries that are solar rich and lie completely or partially between the two tropics. It is a joint venture of India and France, and that is why both of them jointly laid the foundation stone of the headquarters that is being built in Gurugram in Haryana. The major objective of the group is to deploy over 1000 gigawatts of solar energy generation capacity with an investment of about $1,000 billion, that is about $1 trillion, into solar energy by 2030. The ISA focuses mainly on six programs, that is solar application for agricultural use, affordable finance at scale, mini grid systems, solar rooftops, solar e mobility and storage, and large scale solar parks. The objective of the group is that if all the solar rich countries come together, when they have to buy equipment from any company for their solar energy production, they would have a much better bargaining power. And they can also use the platform to exchange the best of technology in this field. Since the news headline was about the ISA getting observer status, let's also look at what exactly do we mean by an observer status. So it is a privilege that is given to some organizations who are non-members and give them an ability to participate officially in the organization's activities. Meaning that now that ISA is an observer in the UN General Assembly, it can be represented by officials in the ongoing sessions of the UN General Assembly and give their 2 cents in the ongoing discussions. So the observer states have the ability to participate, but they don't have the ability to vote or to propose any resolutions in the organization. The next article that we have talks about the government's initiative to use stubble as a biofuel. As you know, for the past many years now, the governments have been looking to solve the problem of stubble burning in North India that is leading to a lot of pollution and bickering between the North states. One initiative that now is being taken is using of this stubble as a biofuel. As per the Environment Minister, the NTPC, that is a National Thermal Power Corporation, has procured 3,000 tons of stubble as an experiment to use this stubble as a biofuel. The government has allocated a sum of 700 crore rupees to the NTPC for buying this stubble from the farmers. This is just an experimentation phase, and if it does turn out to be successful, this can turn into a full-fledged policy for using stubble in the country. The opposition members in the parliament debate also questioned the government's announcement of achieving a net zero target by 2070, saying that the government's policies are not in line with the announcement that the Prime Minister has made at the climate change summit at Glasgow. Now, while this is a pretty ambitious plan, it is not the first time that the government is talking about using biofuel. We have a proper national biofuel policy that was released in the year 2018. Let's see what exactly is India's biofuel policy. Our biofuel policy mainly is focused on using ethanol as a biofuel. As we know, ethanol is a byproduct in the sugar industry and is produced by the fermentation of sugar by yeast. India has been working on the ethanol blending program, under which the government is trying to blend ethanol with petrol, which will serve a couple of purposes. Number one, it will reduce the crude oil import of India, and second, it would also bring down the emissions that we have. The government recently advanced the target of achieving 20% ethanol blending from 2030 to 2025 itself. So by 2025, under the E20 program, India wants to achieve 20% ethanol blending. Do note that right now we are blending about 8.5% ethanol with petrol in India. There are some issues with this policy, however. The 2018 National Policy on Biofuel talks about using grass and algae mainly and not ethanol. There are many people who say that the use of ethanol would mean that we are diverting the food grains that could have been used to feed the hungry people but now are rather being used to make fuel. So rather than using those things which are edible, we should have focus on those things which are not edible because we still have a large number of hungry people in India. As you can see, the argument against the policy says that the food grains are meant to be sold at cheaper prices to those who can't afford it rather than using it as a fuel. India still ranks 94th in the global hunger index, and thus we are not out of this problem of hunger. Not just this, making of biofuels also requires a massive quantity of water, which could restrain our water resources, which are already at an all time low. The one counter argument here, however, is that when you say that India ranks very badly in the hunger index, understand that this hunger index does not measure people who are hungry for food. If I give you rice for every day, 365 days in a year, you will not be hungry, generally speaking. But as per this index, since you are not getting enough nutritional value, you will still be regarded as hungry. So just because India ranks badly in the hunger index doesn't mean people don't have food to eat. It means people are not getting the right nutrition to eat. So let's not confuse that part. These are the articles we had for you from the Hindu newspaper today. Now a couple of practice questions. Number one, what steps are being taken by the government of India to realize the complete potential of biofuels in the country? Also discuss the potential of such policy measures. Second, we must give as much importance to the mental health of an individual as we do to the physical health. In the light of this statement, bring out the initiatives taken by the government to support the mental well being of Indian citizens. Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video.